call, please. Mrs. Schluter.
Sure. Mr. Alexandrovich?
Here.
Mrs. Evans?
Here.
Mrs. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Nielsen?
Here.
Mrs. Witkowski?
Here.
I am here, and Mrs. Larson's excused.
Thank you. Has the meeting been properly posted, Dr. Katz?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is the Franklin Health Department Anti-Tobacco Billboard Award presentation. And we have Mrs. Kathy Hahn, the public health nurse.
I am a nurse with the Franklin Health Department, and we have been doing this billboard since 1995. This was actually the 19th. Okay. This was the 19th annual billboard contest. Funding for this program comes from the licenses that businesses purchase in order to sell tobacco in Franklin, and a portion of that comes to the health department just for this program. I do presentations each year for the 7th grade students, and it includes the things that are included in their health curriculum related to tobacco, and it's based on best practices, what will make the most impact on the youth. In response to the presentation, they create artwork, and there were 250 entries this year. The theme was Truth About Tobacco, so it was a wide variety of topics, and their artwork reflected many different aspects of it. The judges told me they had a hard time choosing the winners, and yet they did. We have the 5 that will become billboards. 3 of the judges are here tonight that I'll ask him to come forward and congratulate the winners, including Superintendent Dr. Patz, Police Chief Oliva, Alderman and School Board President Janet Evans. We also had Kristen Wilhelm, who is an alderman, Alderman Suzanne Mayer, Fire Chief Adam Remington, Principal from the middle school Chris Reuter, art teacher Jean Moore from the middle school. We had people from the state FACT program, which is the youth tobacco prevention program in Wisconsin, as well as members of our Franklin Teens Fighting Tobacco. So we had many judges, and these winners just rose to the top. Each winner's artwork will be up for 1 month, beginning in November, and the last one will be up for a month in March. So I will pass these around so the school board can see them. And Chief Oliva. And if they stand over here, what I'll have you do, the winners come and you can shake the hands of the judges that chose you, and I will, I'll show everyone your artwork and give you a copy that you can keep for yourself. So our first place winner was Carissa D'Amato. Come on up. And this is Carissa's artwork. It says "Smoking Stinks." It really shows it. There you go. That's yours to keep. And she is getting a $50 Simon gift card. You stay right here. Yeah. And Katie Lehman, no, I haven't heard back from her, is our our 4th place winner, and was her message, Wisconsin is better smoke-free. She will be getting $75 gift card. Our 3rd place winner is Jordan Alveda. And this is her artwork. 4,000 chemicals
did you say where the money comes from? Did I
Yes.
miss that? Okay.
The city, anybody who sells tobacco has to purchase a license, and it's a $100 license, and the health department receives $75 of that in order to put this program on. So this is what we would pay for the billboards, the printing, the forms, and for the license.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kathy.
Thanks.
Congratulations. Item 4 on the agenda is community comment. Per board policy, we allow up to 15 minutes of resident comment. Would anyone like to make a comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Witkowski. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Item 6, consent agenda. Would any board member like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving items 6A through 6C, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Item 7, school board announcements. Are there any announcements?
I'd just like to thank the board members who participated in the 4th of July parade, and also Dr. Pats who participated in it. We passed out a lot of candy, and it was a beautiful day, and I think it was a nice way for us to get out into the community. So, thank you.
Thanks for donating your car and your husband.
No problem.
Thank you. I'd like to announce that you probably all received the meeting workshops today, but on September 18th in Pewaukee is the regional meeting. It'll start at 6 o'clock. So we'll ask Megan to send out an email asking who can attend that regional meeting and if you're interested. So I'll get with you, together with you for that, to send that out. Any other announcements? All right, thank you. And school board calendar, we have a regular board meeting Wednesday, August 20th, 2014, here at the ECC at 5:30 p.m. We have an annual meeting of the electors on Wednesday, August 20th, here at 6 o'clock p.m., and a regular board meeting Wednesday, September 10th, here at the ECC at 6 o'clock p.m. And item 9A, I'm looking for a motion to approve the 2014 annual meeting agenda. Has everyone reviewed the agenda for the annual meeting? And are there any questions? Hearing none, do I hear that motion?
I'll make a motion to approve that as recommended.
Motion by Mrs. Klein, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Schlueter. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. And we have item 8B, 9B, I'm sorry, motion to approve the Southwestern Wisconsin School Alliance Agreement. Dr. Pats.
This is an affiliation we have on an annual basis that helps us get some legislative support, I guess you could say, and familiarity with what's going on at the state capitol. During the budget process, we do have a lobbyist that works with our group, brings us information periodically, and it's well worth our time, I think, to be able to take a look at some of the advocacy issues that are going forward, especially as we approach a gubernatorial election, some of the hot issues that might be out there. So we would recommend approval. It's a $3,000 membership fee that we pay all the schools. I think there's 31 schools in our area, Milwaukee County, that belong to it, and so we would recommend approval to belong to the Southeastern Wisconsin Alliance.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Patsy? It used to be that we would get a representative from the board to attend those meetings, and I know they're very early in the morning, and it was hard to get a representative, and you do attend these, do you attend every month?
Not every month, no.
Not every month. And the purpose of these are for advocacy. Can we ask that you give a report
Sure.
when you go to those, so we know what is going
Absolutely.
on at those?
Sure will.
Do I hear a motion to approve the, lost lost my agenda, I'm sorry. Southwestern Wisconsin School Alliance Agreement.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Alexandrovich. Any discussion?
So it does say dues check one, there's two $3,000.
Pardon me?
There's two $3,000 items on here?
That's if you belong to the Chapter 220, the other part of it, and we have phased out of that over several years, so we don't belong to
We
that.
don't, just the 3,000,
Right?
and we're not part of that Hanover project either, that other,
No.
okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 9C, we have the 2014-15 draft one of the district budget, and we're looking to adopt that tonight. Mr. Milzer?
Yes, the form of the budget that we'd be adopting is on page 13 of the whole budget packet. There was a question last time about whether we could do a 0% or project a 0% tax increase. We took a look at that. Between that meeting and now, the Department of Public Instruction came out with the parameters that they're projecting to use to distribute aid in October, and those were more in our favor than we were projecting. So it looks like we could do the 0% increase. I didn't change the documents, but if, I'm assuming the board would like to do that if it's possible. So when you make the motion to approve it, just to approve it changed so that there's a 0% tax increase. And then I'll do that, I'll redo the budget document itself before we put it up on the web. I'll send you all a new copy, and that'll be the budget that we have at the annual meeting then.
So you would be looking for a motion to approve budget draft one with a 0%
Tax
tax
increase.
levy? Okay. Also, for the board, we have Chief Oliva in the audience to answer any questions about police liaison officer, and Dr. Pats has
Sure.
information on that also.
I told the board this information last time, but just a quick refresher. Chief Oliva and Mr. Hahn and high school administration and I met, it was last year, in the spring sometime, to talk about the reinstating of a police liaison officer. We take a look at it. It's something that there was an interest in on both parties. High school people, you had gotten some information from me yesterday regarding the number of calls that we've gotten and so on and so forth. And today I visited with high school administration again to talk about what they're, I just flat out said, what is the primary reason and benefit that we think we will receive from this? Because there is no data to talk about effectiveness or anything else. Even in schools that have had police liaison officers, you still have issues, and there are people out there who think as soon as you get one, all the problems go away. That's just not the case. They're still there. But we do want to make sure that we have a good relationship going with our, and we've had a good relationship going with our police department. This would offer us an opportunity, if the board approves so, in the words of our high school administration, to create some linkages to make sure we might be heading off some of the things that might be coming forward if they find out there's information on things that kids are doing that the police department might not be aware of, and kids want to have somebody confidentially to talk to, we would do that. So we've got some details to work out yet in terms of the schedule and who that officer will be and those kinds of things. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, we sort of have a tentative agreement between you and I anyway that we would look at the start of the school years when we would start this process. And I don't know what the issues might be on your end as far as moving forward from the approval from anybody. So I had told the board formal approval hadn't been gotten yet.
I have a tentative formal approval to start in September based on a understanding or agreement on the cost share. And we briefly discussed that. I think there was a little bit of maybe a different way of looking at how to do that and what a 50-50 share means. I think it means something differently to the school because of the school year as opposed to department who hired an officer for a full year. So if we can work out that part of the agreement, everything else I know we talked about, role and responsibilities, we can work that out and understanding with MOU. I think that's all going to work out fine from my end. I need to get the cost share nailed down before I can get them formally sealed and delivered.
Okay. Well, and Rick and I talked about that, and Jim and I briefly touched on it. We're going to have that officer for 180 days. And contractually, that person, we're dealing with an employee, pretty much, so we're taking a look at his 260-day contract, I believe it is. We have him for 180 days, so we have to equate that out and get that, and I'm very confident we can work that out without any issues. So should the board approve that position in the budget, or that allotment of money in the budget for that purpose, we would be able to work that out, I'm sure.
So is the cost you shared, 110,000, is that the 180-day cost, or is that the 260-day cost?
Well, that's just the total cost right now. Is that correct? The number,
That figure would be for a full year, 260 day.
But we're sharing the school year.
We'd
So
be
we-
sharing that cost, depending on how.
right.
So we're 55,000.
Well, we want to take a look at what, because we get them for more days. We have 180 days out of the 260. So we would have to look at that to make sure there's a balance between the time we get him and the time that he's available for the police department. We would actually be getting him more.
So we're not really sharing the cost of his time in the building. We're paying for the full cost of him in the building. There is really no
No,
cost
we're
share. The
sharing.
way I'm thinking of it, there would be
No.
a share of, there's the cost of someone in the building. Let's say it's, I don't know, 60% of the 110,000. And of that amount, we would be sharing the cost. That's how I understood the 50% share. Otherwise, we're paying for the
Well, I
full
think,
cost of having somebody in the building.
right. Well, the 50% share was an arbitrary discussion that we had at one time about, and I think that was sort of the figure that was used the last time we had one. So I would ask that the board sort of take that figure and put it aside for a second, because we want to equate that out to the time that we have the officer versus the time the city has the officer, based on that 260-day total. If we have 180 days, that equates to what? And there's where the cost sharing would come in. It would be like any normal contracted service that we would do.
How much is going to be in the budget for this?
What'd you put in, Jim? Do you recall, for the budget?
No.
It's not in the budget, is it?
It's not in the budget right now,
Oh,
and
because we
we're
have-
still
How much
negotiating.
will be in the budget for this?
Depends on what the cost is.
Yeah, it depends what it comes down to. I think 55 would be the top, because that would be half of the full cost for a year, and the way it worked last time, we would have paid something less than that, because we would have paid half the cost for when we were using the officer. But it sounds like that's still to be determined.
Oh, so 55 is an absolute ceiling.
No, I wouldn't say that,
that
no.
either.
It sounded like Jim said that.
That was what I said.
That's what you said, but that's not what Steve said. That's what you said, but that's not what Steve said.
Exactly.
Here's the easy math. We have an employee for 260 days. If we divide that out on a daily basis,
Let's just do that right now.
whatever that salary is divided by 260, and we take 180 of that, that's our cost.
It's about two-thirds.
That's just simple math.
Dr. Pats, if I recall, and I could be wrong, the officer, when we had the officer in the past, during the time they worked for the school district, they also had some responsibilities with the police department. So they weren't strictly working for the school district those 180 days.
Right.
So,
But that's what we're working out, because we want them
Correct.
for the 180 days.
full-time in the
Right.
building, okay. I
Right.
just wanted to be clear, because in the past,
Right.
they were working with the department as well as the district, which was difficult at times, because when we needed the officers, they weren't always there.
I guess I can address that. We talked about that, and we're gonna try to minimize that. We can't eliminate it totally, because it is a police department employee that has training responsibilities, and something could come up. So, we can, again, I'd be happy to have Dr. Pass's formula, but I understand your concerns. And I think the city probably would be willing to settle for the 50-50, taking into consideration that he might not be there the whole 180 days. He might have to be called out sometime. But in addition, I believe that that officer might be in your schools more than 180 days, because I would hope that he participates in some of your staff meetings, planning meetings, extra school curricular activities. So, I mean, if you want to cost out every hour, you could.
No.
Simple formula would be the 50-50, but we can discuss that further. I mean, that's your concern of yours. I don't know.
I know from my standpoint, the cost isn't so much a concern as I'd just like to know what it is. You know, and like top end, if we said top end was 55, 75, okay, I know it won't go over that, and if it's better than that, great.
Well, it's about 76,000 if you do the math that Steve just
Yeah.
outlined.
I guess I'm not sure how this cannot be in the budget when several years ago, the board voted to remove the police liaison officer from the budget. How can this not be a budget item?
He's just saying it's not in there.
It's not in the budget because we haven't had one since it was removed from the budget. That was a budget cut.
Yeah.
But if we're approving the budget tonight, don't we have to place it in the budget?
Well, that's what your discussion is. I mean, it'll be placed in the budget if that's what the board approves. Right now, we don't have an approval for the officer or this program to go forward. So you're kind of approving that and telling the administration, we want this placed into the budget by doing that.
Well, we should have a motion, I would expect.
On the high end, yeah,
Well, that was the question, if we needed a motion. I thought we discussed we might not need that motion, it's just going to be,
Yeah, I don't think you need a separate motion
In the
for it.
budget.
Right. If the board is a consensus that you want to add that,
Oh, I'd like to vote
then
on
you could do that.
issue. I think we should vote.
Just to have a figure for everyone, Rick's point is well taken, where there might have to be some days where he has to be out for training. If we took a look at the maximum end, that dollar amount would be about $75,000 on 180 days, excuse me. And if we look at the training and those other kind of things, that would go down, obviously.
And what would be the goals of the, of including that? What are we expecting to gain by adding this officer?
Well, if...
And how will we know it's effective? You know, a year from now, how will we know that this was a decision we wanted to make?
Well, I guess you have to take a look at the availability of that officer and his presence in the building. Have we seen any decrease in some of the issues that have taken place at the high school, would be one example. I think the police department, based on what they would get in terms of building relationship with students, when kids come in and talk about what they know what's going on, or you're able to do some sort of, I don't want to say undercover, that's not the appropriate word, but, confidential inquiries with students. I think there's that relationship that exists between people who have someone there that's they can confide in and some action against it. There are also issues that we've gotten, the big issue that was brought up in our conversation this morning with the high school people, we're getting more and more of these cyber issues that happen outside of the school. All of a sudden, they're become a school issue because the parents bring it to our attention, and all of a sudden it's an issue. We've had a number of times when we've had to call the police department and get some direction on that, so those kinds of things. As far as in a year, how would we know if it worked? I don't know we have any way of finding empirical evidence that says this definitely cut down on all these things, because it doesn't do that. It's not what it's intended to do, because that doesn't happen anywhere that has an officer. But there is that presence and that security, I guess, to be able to say that if there's a need to have one there right now in a role of a police officer, then it takes on a little bit different meaning.
And
What
perhaps
was that?
there's also an education piece to it, where the officer is educating the youth in the schools with regard to various things that will help them make better choices. So
Well,
it would-
there's a class practical law that they do tours in the station, so that would be helpful as well within that, even in that.
Would they be available for traffic issues and some of the behaviors we talked about at a previous meeting?
Well, I guess that's something that we would have to sit down and talk about, because, we are gonna have traffic issues the first few days. And just having an officer standing out there might take away a few obscene gestures towards our staff, you never know.
Chief Oliva?
I wouldn't commit that officer to traffic, I mean, that's a specific assignment. If you need assistance with traffic, we have a patrol officer assist. This officer would be committed to school resource officer position, and the fairly common roles, responsibilities in this position, while there are some room for, agreements about what he should or shouldn't do, or what she should do or shouldn't do, we can come to that agreement over time, decide, what the proper role is. Like Dr. Katz mentioned, sometimes it's very hard to measure what whoever they get. I'm proud of my department and my officers, but I will be the first to admit that not all my officers are created equal. Some are better than others dealing with kids and juvenile issues and relating to kids. And that's what my goal is, to find the right person, right fit for this position, so you have someone that can work good with your students and your staff and provide a benefit. I think there'll be plenty of benefits. And if nothing else, I think it's just the safety factor, having an officer in the school, that the community knows that you have an officer in the school. And nowadays, you don't realize how many school-related shootings there are in the country. There's many of them. And the day after a shooting in a school, without a school resource officer, communities will ask, did we have an officer in the school? That's when you have to really explain why you chose not to have it. Not to say that an officer could prevent it, but most likely, I think it would minimize any type of an incident occurring in the high school having an officer there. Most school-related shootings are very short duration, and it ends only when, normally, when a person is confronted by an armed police officer, is when that situation is terminated, either by the officer or the person himself. So I think it would be beneficial to have someone on site to address that potential too. Just for comparison purposes, we're one of the few schools in this area without a school resource officer. A lot of school districts have multiple resource officers. They have multiple high schools, they have older high schools or middle schools. So we're kind of behind everybody else in this issue. If you're leery about it, I mean, this could be a year-to-year commitment. And if you don't like it after a year, then we're done. I think it's worth trying again.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. So this officer would primarily be in the high school,
Right.
not traveling around to the
Wouldn't travel,
various
but
schools?
there would be and we have to talk about this, but there would be occasions where we might have a reason to have him go to the middle school for something or whatever.
Okay. And then my other question, Chief, is it sounds like you and Dr. Pats will be working closely together to identify the right person for this position?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it a uniform position? Always carrying a gun? I just want to be sure that I understand. I don't want to assume this. I want to.
Discussed that. I think we agreed that primarily we would start with him or her in a uniform position with the ability to go into plain clothes for certain occasions or purposes. And that's pretty much across the board with school resource officer positions. I don't have a percentage, but I think it's a fair balance between uniformed and plain clothes. There's arguments for both. There's pros and cons for both. We thought it'd probably be a good idea to start out as a uniform officer to show that presence and show the students that there's someone there. But that's flexible. That can be discussed. This whole program is flexible. It can be discussed as we go along and as we talk about it. We'll try, we'll have a plan. We'll go forward and we'll discuss it as it progresses and we'll adjust it as needed.
I think if the program moves forward, I think having that officer initially be uniformed would make a lot of sense. Show that presence at the beginning. So I'd support that.
Are we looking for a motion to add the police liaison officer to the budget? If so, I make that motion.
I will second.
We have a motion by Mr. Alexandrovich, a second by Mr. Sleater. Is there any discussion?
So when was the last time we had the officer at the school? What
I
year?
believe it would have been 5 years ago.
2009? And so now we have a new principal since that time, and I don't know if you were you police chief then? I don't know. You were. So, and we did decide that that wasn't working. 'cause-
No, we decided at that time that from a budgetary standpoint, there were other things that we thought we needed to contribute that money towards programming. We thought it was, at that time, it was a better way to go.
Although I guess I can't imagine that safety would have been an issue that we would have been comfortable with cutting. If the reason we're adding it in is because of a safety issue, why would we have cut it because of a safety issue? It doesn't seem to be consistent.
You'd have to ask the school board members in 2009.
You were on the board.
And I think, this is my opinion, but I'm not sure that it's the best use of our public resources, because, I mean, Grant, you are obligated to participate in the school environment anyway, because I mean, that's public safety. And if there are issues, you come to the school. So there's nothing that's going to change from that perspective. Yes, you might be there quicker, but for me, if it's about, drug abuse and those kind of issues, I think the resources would be better spent on a FAPSU grant to kind of address it on a more holistic community basis. And that's just my experience, so I just want to make sure that you maybe think about that.
And here we spent 200, or how many millions of dollars for a safe turf field, but who cares about the students inside the building being safe?
I'm not sure that is necessarily gets you then more safety. See, you're equating an additional
I
officer
think it would
with
give more
additional
safety. It's not when, it's not if, it's when it's gonna happen. Absolutely. Did you see Oak Creek, what happened?
I'm
Twice?
not sure what you're,
The Sikh temple at a hotel, not very long ago.
and I'm not sure that, again, you can't predict when that can happen.
Exactly, but why not be better safe than sorry for your students?
Again, I'm not sure that just because you have someone in the building that that's going to prevent
I would
that from
disagree.
happening.
Stephen, you sent out that email about the number of incidents throughout the last year. What was, were those numbers high, low, middle of the road? And the total, I think, was 28.
Yeah, I would say there probably it could have been higher. Some of them were handled, independently. In terms of what Nick told me this morning, I asked him, how does that correspond to other school districts? And our numbers are probably a little bit lower than what Oak Creek was, but it was the only, there isn't any good data to say it's high, low, it's good, or it's not.
And not that you can, like we talked about, equate having a presence in there with seeing those numbers change. I mean, you certainly, I guess, would hope they would change, but how many things didn't happen because of the presence? So I understand all that. When I first saw the email, it didn't seem, not that we want any, it just didn't seem like a real high number, which is good.
But those were the ones that were just made to the police department, that's not including the ones that were handled internally, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Chief Oliva, will you be directly in charge of this police officer, or Inspector Hahn, or are you supervising?
There'll be a captain of
Okay.
police at Rochester.
And this would be a new hire you'd have to have between now and September, I'm assuming? Or not necessarily?
No, I'm going to be putting that as a full-time position for a 2015 budget, but I have approval to use an existing officer temporarily starting in September.
Okay.
So I have to backfill that position. Scheduling changes.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Alexandrovich and a second by Mrs. Schlueter. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you want, in your motion, any cost cap, any mention of any dollar figures, or you just,
No, I do not.
no, you do not?
No.
You can always make another motion later if you wanted. Hearing any other discussion? Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
Mrs. Witkowski?
No.
I say yes. Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Aye.
Passes 5-1.
Thank you. Is there any other motion or discussion on the police liaison officer?
I just want to get Rick something real quick that I want.
Okay, thank you, Chief Oliva. Inspector Hahn,
Wait 1 minute, I'm going to get something.
thank you.
For coming.
Okay, we'll continue with our budget discussion. Are there any other topics of the budget that we would like to speak about? We had quite a few questions from Mrs. Bukowski. I did appreciate a lot of your questions.
Thank you.
I guess are we open for questions, or what do we do?
Yeah, this is discussion on the budget before someone would like to make a motion.
I just want a little bit more clarification on the position that's the manager for the PAC, on where they, how they report and how they function. Are they at the high school? Are they, you know, and how's that work?
Sure, and Dr. Pats, when he comes in, I'm sure will add to this. He is at the high school, obviously in the facility where the PAC is, and his direct supervisor is the high school principal, although he will be reporting directly to Dr. Pats as well. So that is essentially the chain of command. I think that's what you're asking.
And then what kind of programming are we expecting to see? Will there be, we're bringing in outside programs? Are there fees that will
Well,
be?
initially, what we're doing is we're going to put our programs in the facility, our school programs. So that's our first start at this. Dr. Pats has articulated that he definitely would like holiday season program there this winter, if we can, to get the community here as well. So he wants to work directly with Mr. Kraus to make sure that we first meet the needs of our district and students, and also meet the needs of the community by bringing in those kinds of performances over time. So again, Dr. Pats can add to that. The question is regarding the Performing Arts Center and our director, and more specifically, what types of things will be held in the venue. And I just to recap, Dr. Pats indicated that we're starting with our school programs, and that you had articulated you wanted some sort of holiday program, that the community would be there, and that we're working to get that good balance. So you could take it from there.
Typically, it takes a year to get one of those off the ground, and you got to make sure all your systems are working and so on and so forth. It also gives our Performing Arts Center director an opportunity, he's really connected, to get venues that are in the area that we may want to bring in, that may be affiliated with just community events and so on and so forth. But I would say after the first year, it'll get a lot of use the first year. I would be surprised if it's not used 4 out of 5 days a week for, not necessarily for a venue up on the stage, but for kids and assemblies and those kinds of things. So it'll get extensive use, and he's in the process already of making sure that he has contacted several groups. He has a lot of acronyms for just about everything. And we've worked with there's a group of Performing Arts Center directors in our, I think it's in our immediate area, but I think it goes all the way to Madison, that they meet, they talk about who's available, but from our goal the first year was school-related performances first, our plays, our high school programs, middle school programs. We're not putting elementary in there the first year. Those people wanted to wait a little bit till we get everything figured out. We are going to bring all of the elementary kids over early in the year because we want them to see it. We want them to walk on the stage. Eventually, we want to get drama into our schools so that kids are performing. Next year in summer school, we intend to have a summer theater group, and they have several of those that come into different school districts. And then, of course, there's the community purpose. You know, people want to rent the facility. It's going to be available to anybody and everybody for a fee, of course. And Steve is going to run a really tight ship. He's got a really good reputation from what he did over in Muskego, but he's also really excited to be here to be able to put his stamp on a new facility. And the guy is smarter than a whip. He comes up with more stuff that we didn't think of, or even our construction people didn't think of, in terms of kinds of lights. And you know, today we were talking about going to getting an energy rebate for the different LED lights that we want to put in, and those kinds of things. So we're looking at those. But it'll be a well-used facility. I think once it has some notoriety in terms of people knowing that we have one, and it's usable for everybody, and we will promote it. Megan was working on the website today. We'll be putting pictures up there, contacts, we'll have forms up there for use, we'll have the seating arrangements and all those kinds of things. So the students at the high school will have their talent show every year will be up there. We'll have athletic recognition events in there that we used to have in the green room. All of our musical stuff obviously will be there, so it'll get extensive use. And it'll escalate as the year goes on.
Is there a grand opening plan or ribbon cutting?
Well, yes, there is, but we're walking on eggshells to make darn sure. The carpeting went in there today, but the seats aren't in yet.
So like next month, right?
So next month, yeah, we're planning on using it the first day of school for all staff, for our all-staff get-together. But we want to have a ribbon-cutting ceremony of some kind. We're in that sort of a place where we know the Performing Arts Center will be done, at least we think it will be. And our classrooms we know are done, but then we got a whole lot that isn't going to be done in terms of the interior of the school. So people might be coming to a grand opening thinking, oh, everything's done, and it's not. It won't be done until probably February of next year, but we'll have a good portion, and we want people to see it. And so we're going to be working on that with our music people to put some things together. We'll have some people speaking, and we'll have a sort of tours, walking tours for people, and we'll have some refreshments in the cafeteria and those kinds of things.
And I know this budget does include 3 additional custodial staff tied to that space.
Right.
Is it just strictly for that space, or is there any other enhancements throughout the district? Are we cleaning all the buildings equally now, and if there's no changes to those buildings, it's only in the new facility?
Only at the high school, right.
That we'll be adding those, okay. And I just want to ask a little bit about the new lacrosse teams that we're adding in this budget. I know nothing about it, but, when's the season, and are students aware, or how's that working? I mean, I looked at the website, I saw nothing that we were bringing this on, so I'm feeling a little bit caught off guard on that. Could you bring me up to speed? Somebody.
Right, it's in its infancy, but essentially the Franklin Club teams that the students were on, those students will come over to the high school team and be a high school team, which is what they wanted to do. You had the person who organized the whole thing in front of you. When we talked about the stadium, they were making donations and hoped that they could play there. And since the field is turf and it isn't going to get worn out from use, they can use it now. So there would be boys and girls teams at the high school for lacrosse. And I can't remember I think one is in the fall and one is in the spring, but I can't remember which way it goes.
Boys is in the spring. I don't know when girls is the fall.
Would they not have been able to use a field if they were a club sport?
They would have had to pay for it and be a club sport. Kids want to participate for their high school and be a high school sport. They'll take clubs if they can get it, and that's the only thing, but they would like to be affiliated with the high school.
How will that interfere with soccer and football? How will they coordinate that?
Where will they practice?
How do they coordinate
Yeah.
in terms of what?
The games?
All 3 sports, if there's fall and spring, and then soccer and football.
Well, the fall wouldn't be a conflict for the boys in terms of football and cross country, because they would have a spring sport, so they might have some issues, if you will, with track would probably be the only one, I'm guessing. And for the girls, the issue would be in the fall would be for volleyball, I think. But I think we're talking different clientele of students and a pretty large number of kids. This is going to involve a lot of kids, which is really nice. You go out there on a weekend, you'll see 150 kids out here. Now, there's going to be a cut policy, because we can't keep them all. So we do have to put some limitations on it. So.
From Title IX perspective, it's good because there's a boys and a girls team.
Yeah, Title IX issues.
So did that club get chosen to be brought on as a high school sport largely because of the facility? Because now they have a field to play on, or how did that?
No, because
I'm assuming there's
they've
other
been-
clubs that would like to be
They've been
high school
trying to
sport.
get going like that, Tim, for a number of years.
Right.
Yeah. It worked out nice that it coincided with our facilities, and they assisted with fundraising, and they still will continue to do some of that as well.
One of the things that Sarah does is when someone wants to start an activity or a sport, they have this criteria that they have to go through to start it, and they have to essentially pilot and demonstrate that there's a strong following for that activity, and this sport has done that. They have demonstrated that there's a strong following of our students in this sport, and
Statewide, it's growing significantly, too.
There was like almost 200 participants in the club, for the Franklin Club.
So what other high schools in our conference have teams? Or who will they play?
I think they play in the Classic 8. I think that's where they've been playing. So the Waukesha schools, that area, and I think that's where they would play as well. For the next year, I believe they wouldn't have been able to play without sponsorship of a high school. All those groups said, love to have you, but you have to be a high school group, not a club. You won't be in anymore. So this allows them to continue to play against the teams that they've been playing.
You did note in the human resources area that you're doing a study of athletics and activities. It seems, like we're adding this new sport before we've done a study, and it seems kind of backwards, I guess.
Well, the study has something to do with, how we're paying our current coaches and activity directors in terms of the comparables, really looking at that, and the number of coaches we have. It doesn't relate to what sports we run or what activities we have. It relates to those two other things. For the sports and activities we have, do we have them staffed properly, and are we paying them properly?
Mr. Milzer, a report came out from DPI titled Total General Aid, and it lists Franklin Public Schools as, for 2014-15, that our aid is $15,955,871. But I can't find that number in here. We use equalization aid. Is that?
Right. Yeah,
So we don't use these numbers in our budget?
no.
Okay.
Those numbers don't come out until after we've started our budget, and that number would include equalization aid and then 220 aid, and maybe one other, this escapes me right now, but that's kind of a grouping of them.
Okay.
But when they calculate that, it gives us a sense of what factors they're going to use. They're also doing it on our budget for the previous year rather than the actuals. So if our actuals vary, that number will vary too. So we definitely try and stay below what they're looking at unless we know something about what's happening with our budget that would change that. So it is looking positive for us, but we don't want to leap ahead and say, oh yeah, that's what we're getting, because it never works out that way.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I just want to ask one more question on the lacrosse thing. Do we have a presentation that I missed about them going through all the steps of trying to be going from a club to a school sport, and then now the ability to have them do that? Because I mean, it's a good story, and then something that we can, website, put it on the whatever. It just seems like this just kind of happened, and I didn't get through every single page of the budget, and it wasn't until it was brought up that I even knew it was being converted. So did I miss something, or is this how it normally goes? Just happens?
That's how it normally goes. The team or activity or whatever fills out that study paperwork that goes to the athletic and activities director, and they look through it and see whether it can be added or not, or if it can run as a pilot, or if they have enough. And like in this case, it's been, I think, three years maybe that they've been asking, and they were told that to begin with they didn't have the numbers, they didn't really have a program, and now, as many of you can attest, they have a very strong program. So that, combined with the fact that we now have a field that they can actually play on, were the two things that were really stopping them from having a sport here. So then it's accepted at that point.
But that's my whole point. That's a good story. And so instead of just having it in the budget and then 14-15 starts and we have a new sports team, why wouldn't we have a presentation? Why wouldn't we have something like that at the board level to make, hey, they went through all this stuff, the numbers are up, it's a sport that's growing, highlight it. I guess I'm missing some here. I don't know why we wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't think we're at that point yet. We're just kind of getting, we don't have the stadium for them yet. We're kind of working with them to get started, but I think at some point, it's definitely a good story.
What do you mean we don't have the stadium for them yet? What am I missing here? Aren't they playing at the field?
No, they were playing at the
There's no-
sports complex.
Yeah.
Right, but
There's
won't
no
they be
field.
playing at the
Oh,
field?
yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's no field right now, I guess. So as it's installed and completely installed, and we have a team that can come out, I think it's a great story, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't mean to chew on this, but I mean, the field's gonna be done in August. This is the 14-15 budget. This is the first year they're being as a club sport. So we do have a field. They're now, I would just think that instead of just having, I mean, maybe this is something that was planned for the fall, I don't know, but I just
that's
don't like
my-
to find out something that, especially something like this, that's just the narrative in a budget. I think this should be something that everyone should be made aware of, and maybe if Linda hadn't asked the question about lacrosse being a sport, I'm wondering how many other people even would have known it.
That's what I'm saying, it's kind of like a ribbon cutting ceremony. You wouldn't have one now when there's no field and you're standing out there and there's just gravel. So if you've got the teams coming out and they're standing on the brand-new field and you have all of that, then you have a story that you can write, you have pictures you can use, and it really all comes together at that point, rather than now if
Oh,
we
I
say
know.
it's kind of, it loses its impact and it's gone by the time we have the facility and the kids are out there really being happy and having a good time.
Yeah, I
Put
understand.
those
I didn't mean a
things
ribbon
together.
cutting ceremony, but we've been talking about the Sabre
Mhm.
Performance Center for the, or Sabre Center for the Performing Arts, and that's not ready yet. But we've had a lot of discussion and enthusiasm about that. So anyway, I just,
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised that it wasn't in the executive summary, I guess. Would have been mentioned there, right? When did-
it's just something good to know, especially as a board member, is if we happen to run across somebody in the community, say, hey, I understand, it's cool that lacrosse is a school sport now, instead of just a club sport. I'd have to look at them and go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've had the
That's all.
experience. I've had the experience.
So, I think that'd have been nice, so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I heard about it at a track meet.
So you had the inside scoop. That's why this didn't
I
take
guess
you
I
by
should have
surprise.
shared it in a
Yeah.
board
I know the
announcement.
people who started it too, so there's.
I think it's neat, so. but-
I just have one other question on the,
You need this?
the donations for the stadium. I know you had indicated that we did spend about $400,000 in the 13-14 budget, which was funded with donations of $350,000. But it was, it's recorded in Fund 21, which is a trust fund. So I guess why would we be spending our money for the stadium in this fund and be putting the money that we got for that purpose in the other fund?
In the year that the donation occurs, we can apply expenses to that in Fund 21 and use that donation up. The following year, when the donation comes in and the work is behind us, then it has to be in Fund 10 because Fund 10 is paying for it. As long as the two are working together, we can use Fund 21 for that. But at the time when all of this is completed and then we start receiving donations and everything's paid for, it has to be in Fund 10 to reimburse Fund 10 for the expense that it had.
But we already have expenses in Fund 10, right? You
Some.
spent $400,000 on the project in Fund 10. We have $351,000 that we received in donations. Why would you not put that revenue in the same fund that's paid for the expenses? It's just matching source of revenue with the expenditure.
That's what we're doing.
You indicate you're putting it in Fund 21.
Right. That's where the revenue went. That's where the revenue is supposed to go. That's where the expenditure will go to match it for 13-14.
I wasn't clear. Based on your answer, I assumed that you were talking about Fund 10. But it's, both expenditure and revenue will be highlighted and will be indicated in Fund 21?
We'll be using both funds. 21 will be used for the $350,000 worth of revenue that came in. We'll match that with $350,000 worth of expenditure to use up that donation. The rest of it will be in 10, and then the donations would have to come to 10.
we're
We use
not,
21 as much as we can. That's to our advantage, but we can only do that to a certain point.
although page 16 doesn't indicate any expenditures out of Fund 21 for 14, 15.
Doesn't indicate any expenditures.
No.
Indicates 700,000 worth of expenditures
Oh.
for 14, 15, but that's 14, 15. We're talking about 13, 14 right now. And that's where I'm
The money
trying
that
to-
came in last year, you matched up with the expenses from last year in 21.
right.
The money that's coming in this year, you're putting in 10, because the project will be behind us, and 10 reimburses.
Right, assuming the project's done at the end of August, somewhere in there, and all of our, this year's revenue from donations comes in November, December, January, something like that, then I have to put that into 10. So we'll do as much in Fund 21 as we can.
Well, I had asked the administration to take a look at making this budget with a $0 tax levy increase, and it looks like that's something that's we're gonna be able to do. So I would make the motion to approve the budget as presented, but, where is this now? If the board would like to have the budget with no, approve the budget as indicated with no tax increase for the 14-15 year. And that would also be 0 regardless of how the officer vote just went.
Right.
That got added. We don't know what the dollar's gonna be yet, but it will still be at 0. Okay.
We have a motion by Mr. Nielsen to approve the 2014-15 budget with a 0% tax levy. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Mrs. Klein?
It was.
Second by Mrs. Klein. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Langzadrovich?
Aye.
Mrs. Witkowski?
Aye.
Yes. Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
Passes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Milzer.
You're welcome.
Oh, may I ask, Mr. Milzer, if we could have, will there be a draft number 2 now of the budget, or for the annual meeting?
Yeah, we usually look at it as draft number 2 if we make any changes at all for that.
Could we have these drafts put on the website and also in the public library
Okay.
of Board Docs? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 9D, the board retreat discussion. Dr. Patz and I were discussing the date for the board retreat. I know we all haven't received the final date, and Dr. Patz, we did decide on August 18th, the Monday. What am I doing here?
This is just a sample of what we had talked about last time. When I had asked for everybody's input on dates that would work, the only conflict was with Mrs. Larson. She has wrestling tournaments and things going on, family obligations, so she wouldn't be able to make it. I think it's important that we move forward to get it done. She was involved in one of the goals that I think is actually the last one on the yellow sheet. She and I think Amy was involved in that, so I think that's a pretty solid one. And as we talked last time, I know we went through several of these, and we had mentioned whether they were just things that we are just naturally going to do from an operational standpoint, or whether they were things that we would classify as a goal. Hence there lied the discussion of, having a date for a retreat. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but, to decide, is there a need to go forward, or do we have it laid out here where we have goals, or we have decided what's on here, how we're going to do that? To not have a need for that, or do we want to do that, and do you want to bring a facilitator back in to do that? That was mentioned as a possibility, so I think that's where we're at, is my correct?
Yeah, that's where we were, although we did discuss that we still did not get at our last retreat to the superintendent's goals, and perhaps we wanted to create another goal. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. So we do have to do the superintendent's goals. So I think we do need a retreat to go further, and, I mean, I'd like to hear from the board, but I recall the board saying they wanted the facilitator again, but maybe wrong, so that's what we need the discussion for. So, chime in.
I think the facilitator is a good idea. I thought he worked well. I liked him. As far as superintendent goals, though, I don't think we should be giving Dr. Patz's goals. I think he should be telling us what his goals are, and we should be discussing them. I think he's got some ideas of what he'd like to see happen. I'd like to hear his goals and then discuss it.
That's the process we've been using.
So that's the process we will use?
That's the process we've been using in the
Okay,
past,
good.
I'm just saying.
That's a process where he asks us if we have any opinions on, or input on his goals. I've been to a couple of conferences now where they've said it shouldn't be done that way. We should be giving him the goals we want. I mean, it's up to the board. If we like the process, that's fine. If that's working for us, that's fine. If that's, so, you know, it can be whatever the board decides. But, so, and then we have to see if we can get the same facilitator, which I did talk to him one other time, and he indicated he'd be happy to come back, but of course, it's the date, you know.
I agree with Alan. I thought that having the facilitator was very helpful. It's good to have somebody who's perceived as neutral and somebody who is experienced in leading groups of people and helping them to reach consensus. And I also agree with you, Alan, that I think it works well for the superintendent to give us what he thinks his goal should be as a starting point, and then we can go from there. I mean, as far as discussing them, not to say we might not have other ideas, but, you know, for us, it's a 2-night-a-month commitment, and for him, it's his entire career, and he has the experience, and he knows what this district needs, I think, in a lot of ways better than we do.
And it's good to hear that, because he has to know what we want now, so he can have his
Right.
goals ready.
Right.
So,
They're pretty much ready.
yeah. Yeah,
I would agree what's already been said.
yeah.
Am I hearing I should contact the facilitator and see if he's available on the 18th at 6 o'clock?
Because that was the second bank of dates we tried to get together,
Right.
right?
Yes. Monday, the 18th.
It's just unfortunate that we can't have the whole group. That's okay.
It is.
Okay, so I'll do that. I'll report back right away.
Yeah, we're all in agreement. Great, thank you. Item 10, reports and presentations, pupil services report, seclusion and restraint data. Mrs. Crowell.
Annually, we're required to bring this report to you and to share the data, so you have that information. I put in board docs for you to look at each individual school and how many incidents of restraint and seclusion occurred during the 13-14 school year. So the one thing I wanted to mention to you is that, you know, we tend to look at reports like this and say, how did what changes occurred from last year to this year? And if you recall from last year, in 2012-13, that was the first year that we implemented and had to document these issues, and we concluded at the very end that really the only school that documented their incidents last year was Pleasant View. So I don't think that's one point, but the second point is that I don't think this is going to be a document that you can really look for changes every year, like, oh, if we had this many, maybe next year we're going to have fewer, because it's so dependent on individual student needs. And Ms. Evans and I had a little conversation about this in the sense that last year, for instance, you know, we had these 24 restraints and 14 seclusions at Pleasant View. Well, that student moved from Pleasant View, so now they don't have that issue there. And this happens every year. We have a brand-new kindergartner maybe, or, you know, an early childhood student. Anything could just make these numbers look very different from year to year. So I just wanted to start this by kind of explaining that to you, and then entertaining any questions that you might have.
Well, and the other point, like you and I had talked, Paulette, is when you look at those numbers, you go, gee, you sort of raise your eyebrows. In most cases, that's a small number of kids that are repetitive. It could be the same child that had 20 of them. So it's not like you have that many kids. So I think to Paulette's point, when you look at charts like this from year to year, she said it very well, that the dynamics and the environment of those schools change in terms of who those students are, and it can go up or down in a flash. But I think the one thing that we decided last year we needed to do was improve our documenting, and we have done that.
Yeah, great difference this year, and principals seem very much on the ball with documenting, both on our ONET system, which is special ed, and also on Power Schools. We document on both places.
Yeah, I noticed that 2 schools didn't have any incidences, and that's not because they're not reporting, it's just because they had no need. Is that right? Okay.
So when I'm looking at the Ben Franklin one, number of restraints 8, number of students restrained 1, so that one student obviously had 8 restraints. Okay.
And so there are always students with disabilities, I guess? Is that, what does that tell us, or what should we?
Well, it's kind of unfortunate, but yes, I guess it tells us that the students with disabilities tend to have behavioral issues. So whether you have a student with autism who, you know, throws we call it a meltdown, you know, has a really significant behavioral incident, or a student, you know, with emotional behavioral disabilities, that's what you're seeing. This does apply to regular ed. I mean, that's why we separate it out, because it certainly could apply to one incident that a regular ed student has. And when that happens, then we should be looking at, you know, was that just an isolated incident, or perhaps that would trigger a referral. So those are the things that we're looking for, but we did not have any last year.
Does all staff go through training on how to restrain a student, or just certain staff?
Targeted staff. In the past, we tried making sure that everybody went through the cycle of training, but what we're finding now, we're training teams together. So if we know that we have, let's just take Southwood Glen, you know, we know we have students there who have those needs, then we train that team and we train them together. And so that we're really intervening appropriately with those students. If you train everybody, and let's say you train every elementary teacher in that building, and they don't have a student all year long, your training is really lost on that. So we found it to be much more effective to really center on the teams that are dealing with the children who have those needs.
So also, it's interesting that you know, the grade schools have a grouping, but there's nothing at the middle school. So they would move through, though, or do students improve on these behaviors?
Sure,
as they
and,
go
you know,
through?
I guess one of the things that just comes to my mind, and this could be it could be an overgeneralization, but our students with more significant needs who are in, they used to be called our CD programs, but they're really cross-categorical now. But the students that are in those significant programs, which are generally Ben Franklin, Southwood Glen, we do have those classes at the middle school and the high school, but those classes are pretty small. And so it just is the case. I mean, this year we didn't have anybody at Forest Park, you know, but we did have some at the high school, and it's most likely within some of those programs.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, and I don't know how to word this without sounding completely out of line, but these are special needs students that are showing up on here. If we had someone who needed to be restrained and secluded who wasn't a special needs student, would we consider them for expulsion? And if we ever would, at what point do special needs students cross that line that we say they're just shouldn't be in the school? Is there a line like that?
It's a really good question, actually. I think that the seclusion and restraint, approach is really about things that typically are not really involved with discipline. They're usually internal, self kinds of things, but they can affect staff. For example, we have had incidents where students might hurt a staff member themselves. So our goal then, because if a child is special ed, what we do is bring that team together and we make changes in their program immediately. After every incident, we're re-meeting and seeing if those changes have to occur. If it were a regular ed student who had to be restrained, it could be that they were suspended. I guess it's possible. I'm thinking about a fight. Let's say there was a fight in the cafeteria and principals had to restrain 2 guys who were going at it. Okay, so those should count as a restraint, and there might be discipline applied to that. But then we should be looking at all the factors surrounding it and what caused that need for restraint. Because it's really, you should only be restraining when the health and welfare of the student or another person is involved. So it could happen, and I would think it would go to suspension. Unlikely that it would go to expulsion, but I suppose it could happen. Generally, we separate the two. I think it's kind of important to see that this is really used as an approach to, handle the behavior at the moment, but it isn't necessarily discipline. And the last thing I wanted to say is that it is important to note that we do look at expulsion for kids with special needs as well. They are, that can happen, but then we have to look at whether or not their behavior exhibited was part of their disability.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Item 10B, Treasurer's Report. Mrs. Witkowski.
Well, we have no treasurer's report in July because we're closing out the books for the 13-14 school year.
So we'll get that August 20th?
We have the bank balances piece of it right now. What we don't have is the,
Check register?
we have the check register, that's there too. What we don't have is how we're doing on the budget, because we're closing out the books. That we'll have on the 20th with the, the full description. That center column of budget will turn to unaudited actual.
Is that because of the date of our meeting, or is that typical not to have a treasurer's report right now?
Well, we have the front page of the treasurer's report that we
Is that
could
in the
go
library?
through.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
could
that was
go
it.
through.
I knew I saw that.
We could go through this. We've got that one page, but the pieces that are usually behind it, talking about revenues and expenses for Fund 10 and so forth, aren't there because we're not done with the year yet. So those pieces of it aren't there.
And where is this report now?
It's in the library under Treasurer's Report, correct?
Okay. Somebody read this?
Yes, please.
Sure. Cash balances as of July 10th, 2014. In the general fund, we have $21,348,994, and in the service fund, we have $2,995,225. Prior to August 20th, we anticipate cash requirements in the amount of $4 million from the July 1st and August 15th payrolls and accounts payable.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, though. So it's only 2 payrolls left to apply to the budget, or are there?
13-14 budget?
Correct.
Depending on the group, you could have more than that. 1, 2, 3. As of this report, there'd be 4 payrolls left for teachers.
So is that really accurate then, or?
That's the cash balance we have, and those payrolls are paid out throughout the 12 months. So there isn't a huge expense coming up like the teachers get their full contract paid out.
But it says as of, we have these payrolls, August, you said July, that's 2 payrolls right there, right? 2 dates, 2 payrolls, and you said there were like 4, possibly?
Right, well, the report is July 10th, so both July payrolls and both August payrolls for teachers have yet to be paid out. For 13, 14.
which ended in July.
The year ended June 30th.
June 30th, okay.
Linda, you went out where to find that treasurer's report?
Last year?
Under
No,
financial.
the one you just read.
Oh, God.
Under
It's computer.
financial information in the library. and
Okay,
then
I'm in the
2000
library, finance documents,
Yep,
under 2013, 14 treasurer's reports.
no, 2014, 15 treasurer's reports.
Oh, that'll do it.
But it's really a 13, 14.
No.
Oh,
It gets
what year
confusing
is
at
it?
this point because the,
Here is it.
for example, the checks are the 13, 14 because they're from June. The treasurer's report is from July, so it's 14, 15.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 11, I'm looking for a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, sub 1, sub E, for competitive and bargaining reasons to discuss settlement issues related to litigation involving the school district. The board may take action in closed session if necessary and appropriate. Do I hear that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Witkowski, is there any discussion? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Aye.
I'll say yes. Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Witkowski?
Aye.
And Ms. Larson's excused.
Motion carries. Thank you. We are now in closed session at 7:19. Okay, item 12 is a board meeting debriefing. Are there any comments about the meeting? Okay, hearing none. Future agenda items. We have the 2014-15 tax levy adoption on August 20th. That is that during the annual meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And just a reminder, we have our regular board meeting at 5:30 prior to that.
Here. Here?
Here. Here. And then, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen, second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Witkowski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 7:43.